Not support.
Yeah. What's happened?
You're live now.
Thank you, those members of the public who may have been watching us earlier before the adjournment. We did have some clarification that needed to be attended to that probably was not suitable for live streaming. But we are back now, and we have had our discussion on this airport master plan. We're asking questions of the officers. So now, councillors, I put it to you, would somebody like to move?
I'd like to move the motion, the recommendation that is tabled in the agenda as a motion, and seek support for that motion. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Somebody to second it?
Happy to second it.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves. Good. So would you now like to speak to this document, please, Councillor Ellis?
Isn't it time for me?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for the opportunity to speak to this most forward-thinking project that has been tabled before council. Over the last decade, the future of the Bensall Airport has been prominent in the discussions around council at various times. We've gone from looking at air parks and other usages, including grazing and even for theatrical purposes for assisting our wonderful performing arts group. But the core business of airports is the service of a community. And this is what this project and this draft report before council provides us with. I think it was Councillor Attino that used the word strategic planning or thinking into the future, and he's quite right. This provides us with an A-grade facility, and I really believe that we as a community need to support the aspirations of this report that will come and become a public document if this is passed this evening. I think we have all spoken to and for the future of aviation in this region. We've also shown care for our community members. We're well aware of the historic community use of the airfield lands, and I acknowledge that the Drag Club has been a tenant of the airfield for near on 50 plus years. It's a remarkable site. So we do have to acknowledge and take care of the users. I also acknowledge the economic benefit the user groups play, and so council, as Ms Weigel has identified, are cognizant of that wealth and that opportunity just in terms of well-being, economic and health. Therefore, I recommend to councils that you support the motion that's before council, that we look to the future and encourage the improvement and the good work that's being carried out there. Councillors, I put the motion to you as being something worthy of support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Councillor Reeves.
Councillor Ellis, thanks for your eloquent words there, and I'm sure that the councillors around the table will agree with what you've said and support you. I certainly hope that. Councillors, finding space for an airport is almost impossible these days. It's taken in Sydney to get a second airport 30 or 40 years. So to secure the strategic location of an airport in a regional town and a regional city like ours is absolutely vital and important for the future of our town. Air travel, transit and air cargo is only going to become more and more important. And the regulations around that, larger aircraft, the stipulations around safety and the reference to CASTA as a governing body is critically important. Absolutely, Councillor Ellis and councillors, the co-located tenants at the airfield we pay due respect to, and I look forward to being able to work with those tenants, in particular the Drag Club, and to find, I think we've used the term, a motor sport precinct in future that'll allow them to have the aspiration they want in future, and also allow that airport to undertake what it needs to do, and that is to be a strategic airfield for our shire. We're an unusual shire in Victoria and really in Australia, having to manage three airfields. It's incredible, but that's just the nature of our dispersed, enlarged shire. So councillors, this is an important piece of work. the master plan will guide us into the future and help us meet those regulatory requirements, as well as also our strategic intentions. Thanks, councillors.
Thank you, Councillor Reeves.
Point of order, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Buckley.
Opportunity to move an amendment. Point of order, Mr Mayor. This is my opportunity to move an amendment, is it not?
Yes. Yep.
We could agree, yes.
Yeah, the amendment so reads, that all reference to non-aviation activity be removed and that non-aviation activity be encouraged, provided that it does not infringe CASA requirements.
Another point of order, Mr Mayor, that's not an amendment, that's a complete contrary to the motion that's on the table now.
Can I speak again, Mr Mayor, please?
Yes.
It's not
and-
contrary to the
Mayor, I think you need to rule on the point.
It's not. It's just an amendment to it. That's all. And it doesn't mention anything else but that.
Needs a seconder.
You going to rule on the point, Mayor?
Yes, I just was going to rule on that, what Councillor Rotino has advised, and I would seek clarification from Mr Cannizaro, please.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Councillor Rotino is correct in that what Councillor Buckley has proposed appears to be substantially contrary to the recommendation before you.
Thank you, Mr. Peter. And
So, Mayor, are you going to rule on the point?
yeah, no, that's okay. I'll withdraw that. I'll withdraw that
Thank you.
amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I'll accept that you have withdrawn your motion, or alternative motion, I should
Yeah.
say. And thank you, Councillor Rotino, for clarifying that, and also Mr Cannizaro for your advice. So that puts us to the stage. Councillors, were any other members here, both online and in the chamber, would wish to speak for or against this recommendation? So, Councillor Rotino, would you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. In support of the previous speakers, aviation plays an important role in servicing the needs of regional remote communities across Australia by providing critical services in emergency times, and we saw that most recently for ourselves in the Black Summer bushfire events, where our regional airport here in Bairnsdale, but also the other airports across our region played critical roles. But more importantly, there was a paper released in March this year by the federal government under the infrastructure department that spoke about regional airports, and I'll just quickly, with your indulgence, Mr Mayor, just read a quick summary of what they asked in this paper. And they were asking for people to put forward stuff in relation to regional airports to provide input to influence regional aviation policy. And despite the effect of the bushfires and coronavirus on travellers' holiday plans, we are working to ensure we can quickly re-establish our place as a popular destination of visitors. Our regional areas host many tourism icons and wide-ranging experiences from food, wine, nature, wildlife, culture and heritage. Sound familiar? Does that sound like our region? That attract both international and domestic visitors and will support bushfire recovery in our regional communities. Therefore, effective management, investment and access to airport infrastructure will be crucial to maximise these opportunities. The Australian Government has expressed its commitment to supporting affected regions to invest in tourism infrastructure to build back better in the aftermath of fires. End of quote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rotino. Now, Councillor Tui, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I wish to speak in support of the recommendation. I'm heartened by comments made earlier in regards to the relocation of motorsport type activities, and that's going to be seen as an important move and excuse me, priority for council, and I certainly look forward to that happening. So I'm happy to support the recommendation. Thank you.
Nobody else wish to speak? Oh, Councillor O'Connell? Just, yes, you next, Councillor Buckley. Yes, I've detected that. Thank you. Go ahead, Natalie.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll keep it brief. I'm fully supportive of all the councillors' comments so far. I just wanted to thank the officers again for all their hard work. Jason, Mark and Fiona, an incredible body of work that you have all worked towards over the last 12 months. Certainly for the life of our council, this has been a huge project that we have been working towards, so it's very pleasing to see it come before us before our term finishes. So I just, really happy to support it.
Thank you, Councillor O'Connell.
Yep.
Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, I wish to speak against. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Over the years, we've even used it satisfactorily for grazing, and I presume that still goes on. And here we are, we'll have the place, the land is not occupied. We're turning into scrub, or maybe not as bad as that, but what's going to keep the grass down? What's going to do the traditional thing in relation to fire hazards and that sort of thing? And this is all non-aviation activity, and so I think that, in my view, much more consideration should have been put into that aspect of it. So, thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. If I just may indulge quickly, it was something Councillor Rotino mentioned earlier. It was a passion and driven by some of us first-time councillors here to get this up and running, and somehow or other it basically fell off the list for a period of time. So I would like to acknowledge the work that our CEO did in bringing it back and getting the job done. So thank you, Anthony. All right, councillors, that brings us to the vote. So I would ask councillors...
Do you want to write a reply, Mr Mayor?
Oh, sorry. Yes, of course, because we've had our one speaking against, of course.
Okay, look, I'll keep it very brief. Thank you, Mr Mayor, and for your time. We have a qualified airport manager who will manage the issues, and I wish to allay the fears of Councillor Buckley that I'm sure that he will have a program in place. We've been given time frames in relation to the future of the airfield and its uses. So all these things are not going to happen overnight, nor are we going to likely to fall into an abyss of trouble with the management of this airfield. The airfield project, both from a community concept and perspective, and from an economic perspective, is the right thing for the future of our shire and region. We operate two others. We are unique. One of the other councillors mentioned that, and we have these responsibilities to work and serve our community, and this is an excellent example of it. It's a long time in the making, but by crikey, it's going to be a great success, and I urge everyone to continue to support the development of our airfield and, of course, the recreational sports that have been associated with the airfield. So everything, it looks to me as if this is a win-win proposition that we should all be proud of as a council. I encourage you to support it wholeheartedly. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you again, Councillor Ellis, and my apologies. All right, so I think, councillors, now that puts us in a position to vote, so I would ask all those in favour, please raise your hands. All those against? Thank you. So for the minute takers, Councillor Buckley has voted against. All other councillors have voted for this item. Thank you. So moving along now, councillors, this is 5.2.2, which is a planning permit application 125/2019P for the development of 4 dwellings at 35 Pinnock Street in Bairnsdale. And we have in attendance Miss Nicole Reynolds. So please, if you wish to talk to this item, please, Nicole.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Good evening, councillors, members of ELT. This application is application 125/2019/P, which pertains to land at 35 Pinnock Street, Bairnsdale. The application was lodged originally on the 14th of May 2019 and was requesting the construction of 6 double-storey dwellings and a reduction in the required car parking. The application was referred and the application was subject to public notice. As a result of public notice, 18 objections were received. On the 25th of September 2019, a planning consultation meeting was undertaken. On the 24th of February 2020, the applicant, in response to the concerns, sought to amend the application. The amendment to the application sought approval for 4 single-storey dwellings. The application was re-referred and subject to a second round of public notice on the 2nd of April. The application has now been assessed for final assessment, and the recommendation before you this evening is that the officer's recommendation is to asking council to formally resolve to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for the development of the site for 4 dwellings at 35 Pinnock Street with 12 conditions. The merits of the application are summarised as follows. The application accords with local planning policy, specifically the Bairnsdale Growth Strategy, and identifies opportunities at this location to provide for infill medium density housing and a mix of housing types. The built form after conditions is consistent with the form, style, bulk and character of areas of dwellings in the area. The proposed dwellings will not unreasonably impact on the amenity of the abutting properties with respect to bulk, overshadowing and overlooking. The proposal meets the requirements with respect to car parking and provides all required car parking within the subject site. The proposed development meets the requirements of clause 55 with respect to the development of 2 or more dwellings. There's a shortage of supply of smaller, lower maintenance dwellings, and the proposal is considered to be consistent to respond to these needs. For all these reasons, as summarised, we consider that the application is now worthy of a recommendation for approval to issue a notice of decision to grant with conditions. Many thanks.
Thank you, Nicole. Councillors, do you have questions on this proposal? Councillor Ellis, you're on mute again.
Beg your pardon, Mr Mayor. Just a very quick question for Ms Reynolds. Can she just remind me of the objections to the application, if there are still any standing?
Thank you, Councillor Ellis, for your question. It was remiss of me. As a result of the first round of applications, there were 18 grounds related to car parking, on-street car parking, overshadowing, overlooking, neighbourhood character, not suited to the area, decrease in property values, visual bulk, overdevelopment of the site, safety and stormwater. As a result of the second round of public notice, the objections were not withdrawn, but no further objections were received as a result of the second round of notice.
Thank you, Ms Reynolds. So there's been no new objections or, yeah.
I am able to confirm there are no new written objections to the second round of advertising. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
That's good. I'm just watching the screens and looking around the table. That doesn't appear to be. There don't appear to be any more questions of Ms Reynolds. So, all right. We have Councillor Toohey has moved this, and Councillor Rotino has seconded. So, You wish to speak to this, Councillor Toohey?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd just like to speak to the changes that were made from the original application. Clearly, there was an issue with the community in regards to overdevelopment in the area. The developer has listened to those concerns and has amended their plans in keeping with those concerns and done what is clearly an acceptable job in regards to council's requirements for various different things for planning matters. So I'm happy to move this planning permit. Thank you.
Councillor Rotino?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Just to reiterate Councillor Toohey's comments there, but yes, we held a PCM. We had some good discussion at the PCM. The proponents obviously taken that on board, and we now have a suitable development come back to us. So yes, I support this. Thanks.
So, councillors, anyone else wish to speak for or against this planning application?
Make a quick comment, Mayor. Thank you. Just
Councillor Reeves.
in support that I think it is important in our CBD of Bairnsdale to have a mixed stock of accommodation styles and types, and that is consistent with the streetscape and the amenity of the area. So I'm glad to see that this has come back as it has, and that it will add that alternative for accommodation in the CBD of Bairnsdale.
All right, thank you for that. All right, councillors, if there's no further discussion, we can put this to the vote. So all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's a unanimous decision. Thank you, Ms Reynolds, for your contribution. (5.3.1), which is this is our joint regional leaders' statement to the for the New South Wales Victorian border closure impact and recommendations for Regional Development Australia, Murray Inc. So this is would be spoken to by Ms Pitkin. Would you like to speak to this, please?
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I wasn't quite ready. I was busy doing something else.
But you're ready now, aren't you?
I am, of course, ready now. Mr Mayor, this report is in relation to a joint regional leaders statement that's been released by Regional Development Australia, asking for border businesses and communities to be included in the COVID-19 assistance package. The recommendation asks that Council note the inclusion of East Gippsland Shire as a signatory on the joint statement and endorses the prioritised recommendations as outlined in that statement. There have been short timeframes for the turnaround in relation to this to get the signatory back, and the offer from RD Murray has been discussed with councillors who shared the view at the time that the matter was important for council to advocate on. So we present this report for your consideration.
Thank you for that. So, councillors, questions in regard to this? Right.
No questions.
Sounds like it. Well, it is. It's of course. It's very, very straightforward, and it's something that we need to endorse. So, Councillor Peltz has moved it. Do we have a seconder? Yeah. Councillor Rotino seconded it. So, Councillor Peltz.
Yes, I'd like to move this recommendation. I think we've been fairly active in this space on many levels. I know with the SEATS group they've been active in this space, and I know rural councils have also been active in regards to advocating on behalf of rural communities across the state. We have found feedback from people having to cross the border for work and shopping, medical, everyday duties, which is common to all of our regions that are councils along the Murray River and along the border of New South Wales and South Australia as well have come across similar issues. Some cross-border points are more respectful than others, but our ones in East Gippsland have been, for the better part, mainly difficult to deal with. Even farmers have found it difficult just to get to one of their other properties on the other side of the border, to deliver stock feed for animals. People that are tradies trying to get to work and just do their normal job. We did ask at one stage, could we have a identification that shows us apart from any other vehicles travelling, hoping that they would identify us regionally. So anyone in East Gippsland would have a stamp that had an East Gippsland logo placed in the bottom left-hand side window of their vehicle, so that at checkpoints they could be waved through, because the likelihood that COVID would be in our region is very low. This was not identified as being a useful thing, and they have not taken up that easy use system, which would actually be a lot easier than having to get the permits, which they changed 7 times in 21 days, one not even lasting 14 hours. So it has been a very difficult process for people and users trying to get the right permits and be compliant to be able to cross the border to do their everyday jobs. So with that said, I think it's a very important thing that we act in the best interest of our community, trying to earn a living and for our economy in this day and age of the COVID-19 pandemic, and specifically after the horrific black summer that we had, that had our region on fire for equivalent of 2 months. So with that said, I'd like to compel and encourage my fellow councillors to vote in the best interest of their community to support this recommendation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. Councillor Rotino.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'd firstly like to endorse the comments made by Councillor Pells. As individual councillors, our emails are full of examples of where our border communities have really struggled with a lot of, starting with the disasters of the Black Summer and now the COVID-19. In fact, Mr Mayor, I'm going to be quite succinct. The Blackallon state borderline does not reflect reality of the way border towns coexist and support each other. And, when it comes to natural disasters, they don't discriminate during those types of events. In fact, those border lines have become somewhat irrelevant in a national disaster that we're facing right now, like COVID-19. So I just urge all councillors to fully support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rotino. Other councillors wish to speak for or against? Councillor Toohey wishes to speak, and then Councillor Reeves.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Excuse me. Having read some of the information from the media release and particularly from Business New South Wales survey in regards to the fact that there's an average of 2.7 staff per business unable to cross the border to attend work, and an average $8,500 weekly revenue loss for impacted businesses. I see this as a common sense approach, and I know that's severely lacking nowadays, but I think it's a very good common sense approach to an issue that we face as border communities, and I'm more than happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Toohey. Councillor Reeves.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks, councillors. Sometimes it's a bit hard to find a positive out of this sort of adversity, but what I do hope, and reading this joint statement, is that there is a recognition beyond the federation of the regionality of Victoria, New South Wales and our cross-border communities. This pandemic has really been a matter of, sorry to use this expression after the last debate, building the aircraft as we fly it. We really have, as a whole country, been trying to catch up with this pandemic and to make regulations that keep us both safe and functioning. And I hope in future that there is a recognition regional border communities, and that we get better at managing these pandemics and emergencies in future as a result of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Peltz.
If there's no further people wishing to speak, I'd like the right of reply in the manner that the actual wording of this is for the ministers and the authorities to work together constructively in the best interest of these communities. And I'd like that highlighted and understood that this is the manner in which we deliver this tonight, and we would hope that they could actually work, as one of my fellow colleagues said, with common sense, which is actually not very common these days. It is not something that everyone has, but I would like to think that those people working in the best interest of our communities would actually have and find a common ground that makes it a lot easier for us to do our everyday work, because we are being penalised unnecessarily for the amount of people who are actually 400 kilometres away from our border. And quite frankly, it's actually not acceptable that we're actually being penalised for something that's not in our region as such. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. Well, councillors, we could put this to the vote, please. So all those councillors in favour, raise your hands. Good. Thank you, councillors. That is unanimous. This brings us to a part of the evening which, it looks like it's a reasonably important document that we wish to speak on. So this is adoption of our draft budget for 2020 and 2021, and this is has been prepared by our finance manager, Ms. Liz Collins. Now, I'm not seeing her there, so Mr. Cannizzaro, is this where Patricia is going to speak to this?
No, I believe Liz is online.
Or is she on the telephone, perhaps?
I believe so.
I am here, Mr. Mayor, and unfortunately I had to go in through another way to get in, so I'm shown as a guest, but I can see you all and hear you all. So if you see a guest there, that's myself speaking, so apologies for not being able to see me.
So you've just invited yourself. Well done. Good.
I had to, yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to speak to the report. Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and councillors. So the draft budget 2021 presented to this meeting of council was prepared in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act 1989 and the Local Government Planning and Reporting Regulations 2014. The draft 2021 budget adopted by council on the 23rd of June for releasing for public submissions has been amended to take into account a number of items that were unknown at that time. A list of the amendments has been attached to the council report, which provides details of these changes. The most significant amendments relate to additional capital grants that will be received in the 2021 year for capital projects, as well as adjustments for the timing of expected natural disaster reimbursements for the repair works relating to the 2019-20 bushfire events. There are also amendments to adjust some fees and charges income forecast to take into account the impact of a number of council facilities being closed during the year as a result of COVID-19 restrictions. A review of the expected capital works and landfill rehabilitation projects carry forwards that were incomplete at the end of the 1920 program was also undertaken, and capital works and landfill rehabilitation projects were amended by 7.7 million as a result of this review. The timing of funding for some projects, together with the impact of COVID-19 in terms of contractor availability to undertake some works, has seen the expected delivery of a number of projects being moved into the 2021 year. Also to note is that following consideration by a committee of council of the 4 budget submissions received, no recommendations for amendment of the draft budget were made by the committee. A summary of the budget submissions and the recommendations of the Committee of Council are included as an appendix to the report. The budget before Council today supports maintaining services and infrastructure, as well as delivering projects and services that are valued by our community, whilst maintaining rates and charges at the same level as the 2019-20 year. The budget estimates an operating surplus of $22.6 million that will be achieved over the 2021 year. And when taking into account the one-off capital income items, it is expected that an adjusted underlying deficit of $2.5 million will result due to the $8.2 million of the advance payment of the Victorian 2021 Grants Commission payment being received in the 1920 year. If this is taken into account, it would have been an underlying surplus of $5.7 million. Over the remaining 3 years included in the budget, in the Strategic Resource Plan, it's expected that underlying surpluses as well as operating surpluses will be achieved in each year. In terms of the Capital and Major Works program, a significant program of capital works totalling $64.7 million is proposed for the 2021 year, with an average capital works program over the next 4 years of $47.4 million. Also adding to this is the major landfill rehabilitation projects, and $8.8 million of works is planned over 4 years with an average of $2.2 million per year. Council's end-of-year cash position is expected to average approximately $22.3 million over the 4 years of the Strategic Resource Plan. And after taking into consideration the amount of cash that is required to be held to fund day-to-day operations of Council, the amount held in statutory reserves, the unrestricted cash available shows that it will meet Council's day-to-day cash requirements, as well as being able to plan for future major project cash requirements, such as the Raymond Island Ferry replacement. The budget report presented tonight includes a number of recommendations in relation to the adoption of the budget for Council's consideration, and I'm happy to take questions. Thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors.
Thank you, Liz. I'm sure there'll be quite a lot of questions, but I would just actually like to say from my perspective, it's what a great job you've done under some really difficult conditions this year. So congratulations from us as a group to you and your staff for the work that you've put in this year, as I say, under extremely difficult conditions. So congratulations again. Councillors, questions? Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. On item C here in the municipal charge, item 2, it says a municipal charge be declared for the purpose of covering some of the administrative costs. Well, what does that mean? Do you sort out certain costs that should be covered by that, or does it just go into the total revenue, into the consolidated revenue of the rates?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley, for that question. The municipal charge is part of the total rates and charges, and it's a fixed component that's applied to every rateable property, with the exception of any single farming enterprises where they only receive one charge, but it is included in the total amount of rates and charges for when we're considering the rates to be raised. I'm not sure if that answers your question, Councillor Buckley.
I've got another couple if you don't mind. Now, how many shires in Victoria have a municipal charge? What's the percentage, roughly, will do?
I'm not sure of that, Councillor Buckley, and I don't have that information with me this evening. The councils who don't have a municipal charge would still be raising the same total amount of rates and, I'll say, charges. It's a component of the total rates and charges. If you don't have a municipal charge, then the amount of rates applied would be greater. For example, if we didn't have a municipal charge, then that amount would be included in the general rates. So it doesn't change the total of the amount of rates and charges to be raised.
Right, and does our neighbour Wellington have a municipal charge?
My understanding is that Wellington don't have a municipal charge, and there's various reasons why councils may choose not to have a municipal charge, and that's for each council to determine.
And in this document, has the municipal charge come down from the previous percentage?
No, the municipal charge last year was set at 14% of the total rates and charges. Currently under the old Act, which we're still operating under for rates and charges, you can have it up to a maximum of 20% of the total rates and charges. In the 1920 year, council reduced that down to 14%, and it's remained at the same level as the 1920 year, given that the total rates and charges to be raised have not been increased from the 1920 level of rates and charges in total.
2020,
Sorry, Councillor Buckley, the amount of rates and charges in 1920, the amount has remained the same for the 2021 year, so no increase in the base of the total rates and charges from the 1920 year to the 2021 year. It's remained at $230.
Yeah. Yeah, it hasn't increased. No, I see that on this previous document here. And has the valuations increased in this, or hasn't that come in yet? You know, with the state taking over the valuations.
There was, every year there is a revaluation, and overall the valuations did increase, but that does not change the total of the rates and charges. What it does is reduce the rate in the dollar that is applied to each property valuation, and you'll see that information in the budget document. In the notes, you'll see that the reduction in the rate in the dollar applied to the new valuations, so that we only raise the same income from rates and charges as we did in the 1920 year.
And would your job be simpler if it was just incorporated in the general rate? Would that be easier than messing around and trying to decide what ought to be or not? Because we've got anomalies like this here, I may point it out. This is for an unnamed road, and it's got no road, only boat access. And it's my opinion that I feel that people like in those situations shouldn't be charged a service charge. And that's a comment from me.
I'll just reply to that. Thank you, Councillor Buckley. The decision about whether there's a municipal charge component of the rates and charges is a council decision, and council makes that decision every year. So it's the council decision to have a municipal charge that is applied to every rateable assessment.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Peltz, you have a question?
Yes, if I may, Liz. Just a curious one for our community in regards to the total rates raised within our region. And I'm curious about how the bushfire events of January, February have affected our region and the rate valuation on properties, whereas some people have actually lost their homes completely and anything else that they had. So I would be thinking that their properties, I hate to say, would have gone down in value because they don't have the contribution of the value added section. So they will be paying, I would presume they would be thinking that perhaps there would be some kind of rate relief for them. I'm just curious what's happening in that space for the people of our community that have been affected, and how this will affect council's bottom line of raising revenue that it would normally get.
Thank you, Councillor Pels. Now, there's a number of things to address there. Firstly, the valuation date is the 1st of January 2020. So when the revaluation was undertaken, then the historical data of sales particularly impacted on valuations. So in terms of the impact generally on valuations, that probably won't flow through until the 2021 valuations. In terms of properties where there was property loss through the fire, supplementary valuations were undertaken on all of those properties, and therefore their new valuations and new notices that were issued reflected the reduction in their capital improved value. Those properties received a then reduced 1920 rates notice, and until such time as those properties rebuild, their valuations will reflect the current status of that property. In terms of the properties where there was a loss of the primary dwelling or it was totally uninhabitable, then there's been a council resolution in terms of the waiving of those rates for 3 years and or up to the point where they either rebuild or sell the property. So that process obviously reduces the council income, but also means that those properties will not have to pay rates for 3 years if their main dwelling was lost. Whilst others where they just had partial damage, their current valuations will reflect that reduction in valuation because of the impact of the fire. Hopefully that answers your question, Councillor Pels.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Liz. That's great to know, and great for our community to understand that as well, that it's on record. The only last part of my question was how does or has that affected our council's capacity to be able to generate the revenue that we were, that it was equal to last year or equivalent to what we actually would be expecting?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Pels. One of the, as councillors are aware, we received a number of government grants to assist the community and council through the impact from the bushfires. And one of the grants supported our loss of rate income as a result of the impact on property valuations, both for rate waivers, but also the impact on the base income from the impact in the reduction in valuations. So fortuitously, that support from the government has helped us maintain the income, but via a government grant. So the impact hopefully is will not be seen through the budget process here because we have the grant that will pick up the loss of rate income.
Thanks very much, Liz. It's really great for the community to understand that at this time, now that we've got this draft budget on the table. So thank you, that's great.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. There's a hand waving at me furiously down there on the bottom of the screen. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That's the difficulty of working remotely. We just don't know if we're acknowledged without that chat line or the little hand that comes with Teams. Liz, congratulations on a job well done. I just want to talk some big figures for a while. I've noticed in the report and the recommendation that Council is raising around 58 million, or just on under $59 million in fees and charges and rates to run the show this year. But our bigger figures are total expenditure of around 102 million and another figure I've read of 110 million as income. I wonder if you could just talk to us and tell us how we've got to that large figure, how much comes in on grants to make up those figures, and where does that take us, and do we have a substantial capital works program involved in that? A pretty wide question, but I'm hoping that you can talk to the size of our budget this year.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ellis, for that question. And it is important to note the huge increase in the capital grant income. For the 1920 year, we forecast $7.5 million in capital grants, and then moving into the 2021, we're forecasting $23.5 million. So, you know, a significant increase of $16 million there for capital grants, and even through to the 2021 year, still at $15.7 million. So that's a result of a significant number of new capital grants that have been provided to council, and included those $23.5 million capital grants included in the capital works program. Also, just to note, to add to that as well, is within the capital program, there's about $7 million of expected reimbursement for capital works for infrastructure that was destroyed in the 1920 bushfire as well. So those two significant amounts have increased the capital program significantly through the funding of grants and the bushfire reimbursement process. So it has certainly increased our income significantly, up by $20 million from the 1920 year. And you'll also note there is an increase in the expenditure, and once again, that's mainly in relation to the repair and restoration works that will be undertaken in the 2021 year for roads and infrastructure works as well, and there's significant reimbursement expected in the 2021 year for those works also. So a lot of those big changes do relate to bushfire matters.
One final question. I'd just like to talk very quickly to the rate differentials, and where council has worked with you to identify the challenges that were met by a farming community initially, and then later by our bushfire affected sectors of our community and the wider community after that. Can you just clarify how we've addressed the differential rates for this year, taking into account those three natural phenomena and their impacts on our thinking in terms of applying an appropriate rate? So, for instance, while you're thinking, I'll refer to the farmers having a further reduction in their rates as an assistance.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Ellis. And the differential rate for the farm sector, which has been set at 80% of the general rate, that's been maintained at 80% of the general rate, and the commercial industrial set at 145%. In the movements in the valuations, the commercial industrial properties actually had a reduction in their valuations from the previous year, whilst the farm sector had an increase of 7.4% and residential 3.04%. So in terms of what council is proposing and spreading that across the three different categories of rate assessments, the result in this budget is, even though it's a zero increase from the rates and charges, base rates and charges at the end of the 1920 year, there will be some increases and decreases depending on your change in valuation, but on average the residential rates will increase by 0.3%. Commercial industrials will reduce by 2.3%, and the farm sector on average an increase of 1%. but overall the total rates and charges raised will be a zero increase from the 1920 level of rates and charges.
Thank you for that clarification. It's important for us all to know, because I've got no doubt the argument or the discussion on rates, particularly for the farming community, will be a topical issue over the next few days. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Ellis. Anybody else with questions to Liz? All right, that brings us to the stage of somebody.
No, happy to move it. Seconded or?
Okay, well, we've got Councillor Peltz has moved it and Councillor Ellis has seconded it. So you wish to speak now?
I'd just like to say this year's been a really challenging year to do these figures, and Liz has done an extraordinary job. She fully understands the impact to our community and has explained it with the councillors. We've been over these figures many times, and I have to say this is the best outcome that we can deliver to our residents on a fair basis, and I respect Liz's work and my colleagues that they believe that this is the fairest, rates that we can actually deliver to our community under the circumstances. We have been fortunate enough to be able to gather state and federal government assistance, which has taken a lot of the hard work off, some of the equations. So we need to thank them as well in the process, that they've recognised our issues in our region and our hardships, and it will be greatly appreciated too, and wanted to make sure that that's recognised as well in the equation, because our CEO and our Mayor and everyone else has seen every person possible to be able to deliver this budget to our communities in regards to our circumstances. So thank you all, and it's been a really remarkable effort and greatly appreciated. I hope the community can understand it's a really decent budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Peltz. Now, Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just finished a couple of questions to Ms. Collins, so I won't return to those, just to emphasise the importance of the size of our budget and the work that's been done to meet the needs of our wider community, ranging from the farming community through to business, and of course the people impacted by the misfortunes of bushfire. This was a challenging budget to work through, and Ms. Collins and her team have worked particularly hard to achieve what will be a most proactive budget when we go into the coming financial years. It's to be remembered that our total income raised through our fees and charges and rates is around $58.75 million. That our total income is shown around $110 million, with an expenditure of $102 million. These dollars are spent in the Shire of East Gippsland for the benefit of our community, and it's vast. The total capital works program is something of the vicinity of $64.76 million in total, and has a real focus on our infrastructure and a series of new initiatives. Amongst that, we've received around $23.5 million worth of funding to go towards these capital projects. And there is a list available, and I'm sure our Mayor in his press releases in the next day or so will be talking to them. But there's some wonderful things running right from the north up in Omeo, with the Omeo Valley Road major rehabilitation, through down to Lakes Entrance with our Bullock Island projects, across to the east, in Bensdale, the Lucknow Recreational Reserve upgrade. There's just a whole series of different things. Our footpaths, $1 million towards the footpaths, and so it goes on. Our transfer stations, our waste management, our boat ramps, things that we can all be proud of as a council. I'm even pleased to say that we've still been able to offer our pensioner and disability pension holders a small rebate in this budget. Councillors, this is a budget to be proud of and something that will carry this council well into the formation of the new council. So again, I congratulate Mr Collins and all senior members of the entire team of council, not just the executive leaders team, for working to provide us with service and a balanced budget. I encourage you all to support the 2021 budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. So, councillors, does anyone else wish to speak for or against? So, we have Councillor Rotino.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, for the opportunity. I endorse the opening comments in support of the budget. It's been a challenging budget. In fact, of the 4 budgets that this council group has brought down, I believe this is one of the best budgets. In light of all the challenges, I think this is a budget that's not only looked back, but is also looking forward. The budget's been framed to ensure the organisation is appropriately resourced to deliver the work, services and initiatives set out in the revised Council Plan 2017-2021. It responds directly to the plan's objectives that Council is in a strong financial position and can provide services for our future generations of East Gippslanders. And I think that's really important, that we're not just dealing with today, but we're looking forward. And in framing this budget, this group of councillors very aware of the challenges of the devastations that our community's been experiencing in recent times. And whilst the state government, through the local government minister, set a rate cap of 2% for 2021 year, Council, in proposing that this general rates and municipal charge would remain at 2019-2020 level for the 21 year, i.e. that's a 0% increase. And I think it will be well received across the community. You know, in recognition of the impacts of drought and bushfires and COVID-19, we've provided additional financial assistance both in this year and the coming year, and supported ratepayers in a number of ways. Significant government has been provided, as outlined by Councillor Ellis, and some of those projects right across the region, if you think about the $60-odd million going into our regional economy and the amount of times that'll spin around our regional economy, particularly if we've got local contractors picking up the work, it will be a significant injection as well. So I also encourage all our councillors to support this budget tonight, and again endorse your comments, Mr Mayor, around the finance team and led by Liz Collins. But in particular, the budget build, it wasn't just a normal budget build. Normally we're working with assumptions, and this year with the COVID impact, following the bushfire impacts, we were dealing with assumptions with degrees of certainty, from certainty to uncertainty. So I take my hat off to the finance team. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Rotino. Now Councillor Buckley's got his hand up.
Yeah, whilst not for 1 second detracting from the wonderful work you do for us and the effort you put into it, Liz, I'm still not happy with the municipal charge tax, and you know this will never happen in my time, but I'd like to see it revert to a simple capital improvement tax, and it'd be a lot easier on the administration as well, and much fairer. So thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. Councillor Reeves, yes?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Thanks, councillors. And I won't repeat all the excellent points that have been made, except to congratulate the CEO and his team, and the team led by Liz, for the work. We've really set challenges this year through the circumstances as have been described. But I would just pay reference to our council plan. And the council plan is what is driving our budget. So we've set 4 years ago, councillors, the aspirations of our council plan, that strategy. And I think it's really heartening and encouraging to know that we can still deliver on those aspirations of the council plan through this budget that we've seen tonight. And I certainly encourage any prospective candidates in the upcoming election to read the two documents side by side and to understand the importance of them in how one delivers on the other. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Does anybody else wish to speak? So, yes, you do. I was actually going to just say a couple of little words, if that's with your indulgence, and it was mainly to endorse what Councillor Rotino said, that with the very, very large capital works project, I look at this budget as it's very, very responsible, but it's going to create economic stimulus for a region that's begging for it. And I think that's the big key to this, is the economic stimulus which will go out to our community and our businesses. So thank you for that. So yes, you have your right of reply.
Thank you, John. I just wanted to say I endorse and thank my colleagues for their input, because we all have come from different angles on this, and I hope the community can appreciate that it has been slugged out in all different angles in the best interest of them. But I guess the highlight is it's a 0% increase from the previous year, the 1920 year. So I think that's a really great outcome for us, when the state's recommendation is actually 2%, and we've actually decided that we wanted 0% underneath our circumstances. So I think that's something that the community should be really pleased to hear and should be supportive. And I'd just also like to say I'm sort of a bit chuffed to know that this is my last budget to be endorsing and to be going out on. So as I won't be re-standing, I've made that very clear, but I just wanted to say I'm really pleased to be delivering it to the community, that it's, you know, been a really good cause to be able to deliver a budget like this in the last months of our term. So thank you.
No, thank you, Councillor Peltz, and just actually to say, and it is good that you were able to be the mover of the motion on this, your last budget time. Yeah, so no, thank you for that. Thank you, other councillors, for your comments. So, all right, to put this to the vote. So, councillors, all those in favour of the budget? All those against? We have 8 for, 1 against. Councillor Buckley has voted against the budget. And thank you, Ms Collins, again for a job really well done. Thank you. And well done for what a night to pick, to actually have some technical issues in actually getting online. But you've done well to be with us.
Thank you, Councillor White, and all councillors. Thank you.
Good. This is item 5.4.2, which is a report on Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 28th of July 2020. And in attendance we have Ms Patricia Clive, our Governance and Compliance Coordinator. So welcome, Patricia. I tried to introduce you earlier, but for the wrong item.
Yeah, thanks.
Mr Mayor, I'll kick this off.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right. So I'll introduce it, Mr Mayor. So report 5.4.2, report on Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 28th of July 2020. The report is designed to provide Council with an overview of the items discussed at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 28th of July 2020. The committee discussed several items as outlined in the report. I'll take the report as read. However, the committee did commend the work that's been progressed in the organisation on both strategic and operational risks, and we'll be reviewing the risk framework at the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting. The committee also discussed the occupational health and safety self-audit that Council did some months ago, and would like to review the action plan and the progress made against those action plans in their next meet. Also, given the current operating environment, the committee suggested consideration be given to an appropriate time to undertake a staff occupational health and safety cultural survey. Management thought that was a great idea, and we'll timetable that at an appropriate time and then report back to the Audit and Risk Committee and Council. So before you, councillors, there's a recommendation before you to Note the report on the items raised at the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on the 28th of July 2020. With us tonight is also the Governance and Compliance Coordinator, Patricia Clive, and if there are any questions, either myself or Patricia would be happy to respond. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Canizzaro. So, councillors, are there any questions re this report? No waving of hands and silence around the room. So, well, Patricia, I've seen you sitting there for some time, but you're getting away with it quite easy. So, if there's no questions, we'll probably just go for somebody.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, I think it's probably worth making a statement. That was our last Audit and Risk Committee meeting for this councillor group, and as one of the representatives on that group, I wanted to just acknowledge the work done by independent people that are part of that committee. And we've got a very good chair who also ran a continuous improvement special meeting, was on the 11th of August, and we're actively looking at how we can make that committee work better, and the important oversight work that they perform for our organisation. I just thought it was worth acknowledging. Thank you.
Good, thank you for that, Councillor Rotuno. Before I ask for a mover and a seconder, I've noticed that Councillor Reeves has gone off live stream, which there you are. Thank goodness you've come back, because I was just trying to work out, it would be a quick call to IT to see what happened, but thanks for coming back, Councillor Reeves.
Happy to move it, Mr Mayor.
All right, Councillor Roberts has moved that. Yes, look, I will allow it. I did ask for questions and nobody came forward, but it's not quite too late.
It was just a house sort of question whether we actually thanked our previous chair formally for his work in the role.
Yes, we did some months ago, yes.
Yeah, I was just checking that had been done, because I know we asked for it, but I wasn't sure whether we had followed up with it, and it was important because he'd been there for a long time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. So we have a mover in Councillor Roberts. Do we have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Peltz has seconded. So, Councillor Roberts, you've obviously read the report. Would you like to speak to it?
And nothing further to add, Mr Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Peltz.
I'm just happy to see that the roles are filled, and we leave this council with a new audit or an audit committee that's in good stead and has really good qualified people to be overseeing some of the workings internally. So that's great, and I'm really pleased to see that. Thank you.
Yes, and with the work that's been done, continually evolving. So. That's good. Does anyone else wish to speak? All right then, councillors, we can vote on this report. So all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's unanimous on item 5.4.2. 5.4.3. This is another governance issue. This is our Local Government Act 2020 governance arrangements for 1st of September 2020. So I'll hand over to Mr Canizzaro.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Again, we have Patricia Clive on the line, fielding any technical questions at the end of the session. So thank you, Mr Mayor. The report presented to Council tonight covers some key governance arrangements that must be adopted by councils across Victoria by the 1st of September. It's being mandated by the Local Government Act 2020. So the key governance arrangements, and there are 5 of them, and I'll read them out in order. One of those is the governance rules for the conduct of council meetings, and that also incorporates the election period policy. Document 2 is the public transparency policy outlining the access to council's publicly available information. Thirdly, council support and expenses policy. So a review of that policy is being performed, and that details the support for performing the duties of a councillor and identifies the out-of-pocket expenses that will be reimbursed from time to time when performing those duties. Also, the other key governance arrangement is the appointment of the Audit and Risk Committee under the new legislation, which before you includes the reappointment of the existing independent members. And also a refresh and a review of the Audit and Risk Committee charter that outlines the functions of how the committee operates and also in assisting council to fulfil its oversight and corporate governance obligations and responsibilities. So 5 key governance arrangements, and I must say that the recommendations with respect to those arrangements will help to provide a solid foundation for the new council that commences their term in November 2020. Obviously the governance rules are probably one of the key arrangements with respect to how council conducts its meetings, and you will recall that we put that out to public consultation with 1 submission received in terms of feedback. That too is attached to the report. So the governance arrangements have also been prepared in consideration of the requirements under the Local Government Act 2020, also in consideration of the models provided by the Local Government Victoria, and also consultation with our governance peers across Gippsland and Victoria. So again, the report contains several recommendations and officers are seeking Council's consideration and ultimate adoption, but I'll take it as the report is read and happy for either Patricia and I to answer questions.
Thank you, Mr Cannizzaro. So it would appear we have a question from Councillor Peltz.
Yes, there's some curious things here, and I note that there's one that says council meeting durations will be limited to 3 hours, and that there will be a limit of half an hour for people at the open forum for submissions from the community will be limited for 30 minutes. Can you expand on that, please, Mr Cannizzaro?
So the duration of the council meeting we've proposed at 3 hours. If there is a requirement to go beyond that 3 hours, then the council will need to make a decision and pass a resolution to extend that time to beyond 3 hours. And that is obviously to cater to the number of items on a particular night. Yeah. And the 30 minutes in terms of the public speaking, so that's a limitation in terms of the time frame we've got with respect to the hours within the council meeting time, and that 30 minutes is included in that 3 hours.
I think Councillor Ellis had a question. I saw his hand go up before.
Yep, seen it. Thank you, Councillor Ellis. You can't just wave at me, you need to speak.
I do too. Trying to be careful with that muting tag tonight. It's not working very well. All right, I'll be very quick. The matter before us this evening is simply to meet a legislative responsibility to have those matters adopted by the 1st of September. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr Mayor, yes, that's correct, Councillor Ellis.
Thanks, Mr Cannizzaro. And the second question I have then, therefore, and picking up on some of the concern that Councillor Peltz has exhibited, these matters can be reviewed by the new council and some of the decisions, if needed, be reviewed in the life of the new council. Is that correct?
Yeah, through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct, and I think it's fair to say good governance practice would say that we'd review that within 6 to 12 months of the newly elected members.
That's an important act. Thank you.
Councillor Rotino.
Mr Cannizzaro, I was just wondering, I couldn't find it anywhere, but I thought you might be able to elaborate. The piece of governance that covers election periods, does that cover electioneering tactics?
It would provide some guidance around what can and can't happen with respect to that election period, which is 32 days before the election taking place. There is some guidance around what can and can't happen.
I'm just hoping that this council can take a bit of a lead in that respect. I saw some disgusting comments last week on an open platform, individuals hiding behind organisational names and making some misleading and mischievous claims about certain councillors here now. So I hope that this council can raise the bar on all that sort of rubbish. Thank you.
If I may, Mr Mayor, is there an avenue of collecting that information that it is being mischievously put out there, Mr Cannizzaro, and what actions would be taken if that was the case?
I'd have to source that information, and if Councillor Rotino wishes to send that to me, I could have a look at that and see what course of action we could take.
Thank you. If I may, Mr Mayor, I had one more that I couldn't find before, and it was a really curious one because I take it this information is mainly based on the new Local Government Act, but I noticed there was a funny thing talking about placards. The public may display placards at the entrance of the place a council meeting is being conducted, providing the material does not obscure anyone or is offensive. That's a new thing that I've not seen before in my 12 years as a councillor.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's correct. If I could maybe refer to Patricia, who has far more intimate knowledge about that particular one that you've raised, Councillor Pels.
Thank you, Councillor Pels, for the question. That came out through the model governance rules provided by Local Government Victoria. I think this is part of allowing community to have involvement in council processes, and so they're saying that they're allowed to show their support for and against particular matters by being able to demonstrate, show placards and so forth, as long as it doesn't obstruct the access to the building, it doesn't affect anyone, cause any injury or such, and is not offensive. So that's where it's come from, and that's the intent as far as I understand. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Patricia. It was just an unusual one. I was wondering where it came from. That was all, and what the necessity was. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Peltz. I'm pulling on my mask. That would include at the moment, as long as they are wearing their masks as well?
I'm sure that would be the case, Mr Mayor.
So, no further questions? Okay, we have Councillor Peltz has moved this. Councillor Toohey seconded it. So, speak to this, Councillor Peltz? No.
Say thank you to the staff. I think Patricia and co have done a great job, and Peter, it's you're doing the reading and the researching for us, and putting it all in collective terms. So that's great. Thank you.
Good, Councillor Toohey. Okay. Anyone else? All right, councillors. So we can put this item to the vote also. So all those in favour? Thank you, councillors. That's been passed unanimously, and thank you, Patricia, for sitting through all this period of time. Now, councillors, that brings us to 5.4.4, which is adoption of updated strategic resource plan for 2020 through to 2024 as part of the draft revised council plan of 2017 to 2021. Have a little bit of feedback. So I won't say anything else. I'll leave this to Peter again, seeing as the microphone's playing tricks on me.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, we have Rebecca Aston and Jamie Lynch online who have been driving the development of this document, so I might just hand straight to Rebecca and Jamie. They're online. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr Mayor and councillors. I'm going to hand over to Jamie, who's done the work with this. Over to you, Jamie. Thank you.
Good evening, councillors. You have before you a recommendation to adopt the draft revised council plan 2017 to 2021 with the amendments made to the strategic resource plan 2020-24. Under the Local Government Act, council is required to review the strategic resource plan and adopt any amendments by no later than 30 June. So East Gippsland Shire Council receives an extended deadline to 31st of August 2020 from the Minister of Local Government in order to prepare the annual budget and the strategic resource plan. Council had previously adopted the revised council plan in June with only minor changes made to the plan. With adopting the changes made to the strategic resource plan, this will close the loop on the annual review of the council plan. Councillors, you have a recommendation before you this evening.
Good, thank you, Jamie. Councillors, in reading the report, do you have any questions of either Mr Cannizaro or the other officers? Okay, a question or comment, I think we should allow that.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, it's more a comment, like in relation to the strategic resource plan. It's such a critical process. I just wanted to say thank you to Jamie and Miss Ashton for providing the support, because without the resource plan we can't deliver our council plan.
Was that for a comment, Councillor Reeves? You put your hand up?
No, I'm just in furious agreement with Councillor Rotino.
So Councillor Peltz wishes to say something.
I'd just like to say Rebecca has been the queen of council plans ever since I've been here, I think 12 years. And look at this one. She's done a ripper of one. And I think, you know, it'll be the guidelines of the next council for the next 12 months. And I think until they actually get their own in place. And I think it leaves them with good guidelines and a good base to do their next council plan on. So well done. And, you know, you look at it, 2017 to 2021, it's stood a good 4 years. So well done, guys. And how futuristic are you looking? I mean, this is actually, you know, got great direction and great depth to it. And, you know, it's great. So thank you all to the staff, you know, for being innovative 4 years ago and getting us there. Thank you.
Good, thanks, Councillor Peltz. There's no other comments, but maybe to you, Jamie, from me. Was it envisaged in the council plan that we'd be sitting here, some of us around the table wearing masks, and others like heads on sticks on a screen? Probably not.
Definitely not, and that's where we need that flexibility. So I think it's been commended by the way the council has operated to be able to do this with the short notice we received. So, yeah, I commend you all with the way you've responded to it.
Yeah, we're still getting there. Yeah. No, thank you for that. So, would somebody like to move? Councillor Rotino's moved it. Councillor Tui has seconded it. Sorry, Nat, you didn't wave fast enough. Well, how about we get an amendment to the minutes and say that Councillor O'Connell has seconded this item. All right. So, would you like to say a few words, Councillor Rotino?
Just very briefly, Mr Mayor, it's all been said, but you know, the most critical part of any strategic plan is the strategic resource plan. And with the strategic resource plan, the number one important factor is the human resources. So that's all I have to say. It's been a really good plan. It's set our Shire up for the future, and I look forward to it in years to come. Thank you.
How about yourself, Natalie? You wish to comment?
I just endorse Councillor Rotino's comments and thank Peter, Beck and Jamie for their work.
Well said. If there's no further comment, I think we can put this to the vote also, councillors. So all those in favour? Good, that's also unanimous. So I'm not aware of any urgent or other business. Is that correct, Mr CEO? And there is no confidential business. So at this point, item 8 on the agenda says close of meeting at 8:43 p.m. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, officers, for your attendance.